The beginning of the gold rush. The gold rush began on January 24, 1848. The gold was discovered by James W. Marshall at Sutter's Mill in Coloma, California. The discovery brought about 300,000 people to California from other parts of the United States and the rest of the world. They retrieved the gold from streams and riverbeds using proper techniques such as panning. As Marshall recalled, it made my heart thump, for I was certain it was gold. After Marshall discovered the gold at Sutter's Mill, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed. It also had ended the Mexican-American War. It left California in the hands of the United States. Afterwards, the population of 6,500 Californios, some from Spanish and Mexican descent. Basically, the California Gold Rush of 1848 brought so many American citizens, and also new immigrants from Europe to California. At the time, California wasn't a United States territory. Then, California had a rapid growth and gold exports. Even though Marshall and Sutter tried to keep the news under wrap, word got out eventually. And in mid-March, one newspaper had reported a large amount of gold that was being found in Sutter's Mill. Sooner or later, in mid-June, about 3/4 of male population from San Francisco had left town for the gold mines, and the number of miners reached 4,000 by August. As news began to spread about the fortunes being made in California, the first immigrants had arrived were those from lands accessible to both, such as Oregon, Hawaii, Mexico, Chile, Peru, and even China. Later on, news reached East Coast, where reports were skeptical, and the gold fever kicked off. Throughout 1849, people around the United States began to borrow money. They also began to spend their lives saving to make their journey to California. They had never dreamed to pursue of this kind of wealth, but they were dreaming about California. They left their families and hometowns. Women were left behind. They took the new responsibilities, such as running farms, business, and even taking care of their children alone. Thousands of gold miners, known as 49ers, had traveled overland, across mountains, and by sea. They sailed to Panama and even around Cap Horn. Throughout 1850, the surface of gold in California had disappeared, even as miners began to arrive. Mining was a very difficult and dangerous labor. It required good luck as much as skill and hard work. The independent miner working with his pick and shovel had by then sharply decreased from what it had been in 1848. The gold became more and more difficult to reach. Also, the growing of mining drove more and more miners from independence into wage labor. Even though a new technique was invented, which was called the hydraulic mining, which was developed in 1853, it began to bring profits, but it also destroyed the regions and landscapes. Due to the population boom of the gold rush, houses, churches, towns were built through California. To say without the gold rush, who knows, maybe California wouldn't become one of the states. But in fact, that everyone who lives in California might have completely different lives if it wasn't for the gold rush. One thing about the population boom is that it was also often shortage of food, which began to lead to starvation rippling across the country. Now, here's a video that I would like to show about the start of the California Gold Rush.
In the early 1840s, California was a distant outpost that only a handful of Americans had seen. The sleepy port that would become San Francisco had just a few hundred residents. One of the wealthiest people in the region was John Sutter, an affable Swiss immigrant who came here in 1839, intent on building his own private empire. Sutter soon built this fort, amassed 12,000 head of cattle, and took on hundreds of workers. His most prolific crop was debt. He owed money to creditors as far away as Russia. But Sutter was a man with a dream of a vast agricultural domain that he would control. By the mid-1840s, more and more Americans were trickling into California by wagon and ship. Sutter welcomed the newcomers, more subject for his self-styled kingdom. But Sutter had no idea that the trickle would become a flood, a deluge of humanity that would destroy his dream. Sutter's undoing began here, 50 miles northeast of his fort, on the American River. In late 1847, James Marshall and about 20 men were sent here by Sutter to build a sawmill to provide lumber for Sutter's growing ranch. The sawmill was nearly complete when a glint of something caught Marshall's eye. It was January 24th, 1848.
I reached my hand down and picked it up. It made my heart thump, for I was certain it was gold. The piece was about half the size and shape of a pea. Then I saw another.
After making the greatest find in the history of the West, Marshall and the other workers went back to work. Stumbling upon more gold, nugget after nugget. Still in disbelief, Marshall took samples back to Sutter's fort. Here, in this room, Sutter and Marshall tested the shiny metal as best they could. A tattered encyclopedia gave them clues. It was gold, they concluded. But neither man was happy about it. Sutter, sold for 20 cents a few days earlier, was now available from Brannan for $15. In just 9 weeks, he made $36,000. By 1848, whispers of a gold strike had drifted eastward across the country. But few Easterners believed. It was an age when rumors were discounted and government officials were revered. The gold discovery needed validation, and President James Polk delivered just that in early December 1848.
The accounts of the abundance of gold in that territory are of such extraordinary character as would scarcely command belief, were they not corroborated by authentic reports of officers in the public service.
Polk's confirmation reached deep into the soul of millions. His simple words were a powerful call to action. Farmers left their fields. Merchants closed their shops. Soldiers left their posts and made plans for California. Newspapers flamed the fires. Horace Greeley of the New York Tribune.
Fortune lies upon the surface of the earth, as plentiful as the mud in our streets. We look for an addition with...
Now some fun facts about the gold rush. The easiest way to discover the gold was called panning. Panning means scooping up sand and gravel from the river and swirling it around while you sniffle out the water, lighter minerals, and small rocks. Another thing was very few miners ever found gold. Most of the money during this period of time was made by businesses, people who tapped into gold fever craze. Products and supplies were sold at staggering rates. It was known for how the miners got mined. Many miners died at the hand of disease cholera. It spread from dirty water and living conditions. Also, over 97% of miners were men. Most of the miners lived along the rivers in tents. They slept in branches and lived meagerly to survive.